When I told my mom I wasn't handing over my brand new apartment to my pregnant sister, she lost it and chucked a piece of cake right at me. So yeah, I went ahead and pushed to sell the house we co-owned, the one they were all living in, and yep, they got kicked out. I'm 28 now, and while things really blew up just recently, the roots of this mess go back about 7 years. That's when my grandma passed away. She was a kind soul, and honestly, I still miss her a lot. In her will, she left the house to me and my younger sister, Charles, split evenly 50-50ths. Nothing tricky or confusing about it. At the time, I was 21 and grinding through college, trying to wrap up my degree. Charles was 18, just about done with high school. Our mom, Betty, had been living with Grandma, helping take care of her during those last few tough years. After Grandma died, Mom just stayed in the house. Charles stayed too, naturally. It seemed like the logical setup back then. Meanwhile, I was crashing in dorms and later moved through a bunch of plain, low-cost rentals after I graduated and got a job. I didn't have any real need to live in Grandma's house, so the arrangement was simple. Mom and Charles could live there rent-free. In exchange, they agreed to handle all the household bills, stuff like property taxes, utilities, and general upkeep. That sounded fair to me. I figured I was helping them out and it wasn't costing me much directly. My dad wasn't ever really in the picture. He took off when I was a kid, so it was just Mom raising me and Charles. Our relationship wasn't exactly Hallmark level close, but I always thought it was okay. We got along well enough. What happened recently totally blindsided me. After finishing college at 22, I landed a job and made a big goal for myself, buy a home of my own. That became my mission. For 6 straight years, I worked my butt off. I picked up every bit of overtime I could get. I didn't blow money on vacations, flashy electronics, or new cars. My car's pretty old, but it runs fine. My clothes are basic, but they get the job done. I brought lunch from home most days instead of eating out. Every extra dollar went into savings. It took time, but I was focused. Friends would invite me out or plan weekend trips, and most of the time I had to turn them down. It wasn't easy, but I kept thinking about the day I'd finally have a place of my own. And earlier this year, that dream became real. I saved enough for a solid down payment on a 2-bedroom apartment. It cost me $200,000. The neighborhood's decent, not fancy, but safe and quiet, and it slashed my commute by a lot. Signing those papers was honestly one of the proudest moments of my life. Once I had the keys, I spent the first month painting the walls myself. Bought the basics, a bed, a sofa, a small table with some chairs. Took some time to get everything just right. About 8 weeks ago, I officially moved in. For the first time ever, I had a home that was truly mine, something I worked hard for. But not long after that, things started to get weird. Suddenly, my new apartment was a hot topic, and not in a good way. See, my mom and Charles had always acted a little off when it came to my money. Almost like, since I was single and had a job, they figured whatever I earned was fair game, or at least something they should have a say in. Like when I mentioned getting a bonus at work, Mom would jump in with stuff like, you could finally replace the washing machine at the house, meaning Grandma's house where they lived. I told her upkeep was their job, since they lived there. Still, she laid on the guilt, saying the old one was barely hanging on. I caved and covered half. Charles was the same. Even after she picked up a part-time gig at a local store, she'd hit me up all the time. Can you lend me $50? My paycheck's late. Or, my phone bill's crazy this month. Can you help? The amounts weren't huge, but it added up and it happened often. Her reasoning was always, you make more than me and you don't have a family to support. Most of the time I gave in just to avoid drama, but it wore on me. Then, about 2 years back, Charles started dating this guy named Donald. He's 26 now. A year into them dating, he moved into Grandma's house with her and Mom. That didn't sit well with me. I'd met Donald a few times. He seemed all right, but never had a steady job. He'd talk about finding the right opportunity or doing gig work, but mostly he just hung around the house. After he moved in, the calls for help with bills and repairs started ramping up. Mom would call saying the electric bill was insane or that something needed fixing, like a pipe burst or the roof was leaking. I started pushing back more. I told them there are 3 adults living there now. You all need to handle your own budget. Every time, it turned into Mom acting like I was being cold or just didn't get how tough things were for them. Then a few months ago, while I was knee-deep in the whole apartment buying process, Charles dropped the big news. She was pregnant. Mom was beyond excited to become a grandma. I told Charles congrats, of course. It's a big deal. But we never really talked about them moving or anything like that. I figured they'd stay at Grandma's place for a while. It's got 3 bedrooms, plenty of space for now, or maybe they'd eventually get their own place like most couples do when they're starting a family. No one said a word about needing help or moving in with me. Then, just about a month after I'd finished settling into my new place, Mom gave me a call, said we needed a family meeting, and made it sound super serious. She asked me to come by Grandma's house. Honestly, I figured the meeting had something to do with the baby. Maybe they wanted to plan a shower or toss around name ideas. Nothing serious crossed my mind. That afternoon, I hopped in my car and drove over. When I stepped into the living room, I saw my mom, Charles, and Donald all sitting there, dead quiet and looking unusually serious. A chocolate cake was sitting on the coffee table, which immediately struck me as odd. I mean, what kind of serious talk comes with dessert? My mom kicked things off. She launched into this long speech about how families are supposed to stick together, how everyone has to make sacrifices when times get tough. Then she pivoted to Charles and the baby. She talked about how this was a delicate time for Charles, being pregnant and all. How Donald was out there doing his best to land a steady job. But that things were tough with the economy. Charles mostly stared at her hands. She looked like she wanted to disappear. Donald was just sitting there, fixated on his shoes. Not a word from him. And then my mom just dropped the bomb. She said, straight-faced, that since I was single and had a whole 2-bedroom apartment all to myself, and since Charles and Donald were about to start a family, the only reasonable, fair solution was for me to hand over my apartment to them. It wasn't a question, it was a declaration, like it was already decided. She followed it up by saying I could just move into the spare room at Grandma's house. And she smiled like she just solved a big puzzle and expected me to thank her for it. She called it my duty, my Christian responsibility. Even though religion had never been a big part of our lives, I sat there stunned. I swear my mouth was just hanging open. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They wanted me to give up the apartment I'd spent 6 years saving for? The place I worked overtime for, skipped vacations for, packed lunches for? My apartment? She kept going, saying I didn't need that much space just for myself. That Charles deserved a new, clean place to bring her baby home to. She mentioned the new appliances, how everything was freshly painted, how much easier it would be for her to help out with the baby if they were in my apartment instead of the old, worn-out house. I finally found my voice and said, as calmly and clearly as I could, that it wasn't happening. No way. I told them I spent years working to buy that place, and it's mine, paid for with my own money. I wasn't giving it to anyone. I told them Charles and Donald could stay in Grandma's house. It's got enough space, or they could find a place like most couples do when they start a family. That house had always been more than enough for the 3 of them. The second I said no, everything flipped. My mom's whole face changed, tight, red, angry. Her tone snapped from warm and reasonable to full-blown shouting. She accused me of being selfish and ungrateful. She said I'd been allowed to benefit from living rent-free off the family home for years, which was just plain wrong, considering they'd lived there rent-free while I paid my own way and never asked them for a dime. Charles started crying, loud, dramatic sobs. I can't believe you don't care about me or the baby, she said. How can you be this heartless? Then Donald finally looked up and muttered something like, man, I thought you were better than this. This is just low. Like I'd betrayed some sacred trust. The shouting got louder, more heated. I kept my tone level, but I held my ground. I said again, this wasn't happening. The apartment was mine, period. Not up for discussion. My mom got more and more worked up. She was pacing like a caged animal. Then, out of nowhere, she stormed over to the coffee table, grabbed a giant slice of that chocolate cake with her bare hand, and hurled it at me. It hit me square in the chest, splattering up into my face and getting tangled in my hair. She was absolutely screaming by now. Screaming that I was a disgrace, that I was no son of hers, that I was putting my own selfish desires above the needs of my pregnant sister and her unborn baby. Charles was sobbing. Donald was just standing there, looking kind of stunned, but nodding like he agreed with every word Mom said. I didn't yell back. I didn't throw anything. I just grabbed a napkin from the table, wiped the frosting off my shirt and face, and calmly said, "This conversation is over. I'm leaving." As I headed to the front door, all 3 of them were shouting at me. My mother was shrieking that I would regret this forever, that if I walked out, I was no longer her son. Charles was wailing that I was going to stress her into a miscarriage. It was like a wall of noise chasing me out the door. I walked out, shut the door behind me, and drove back to my apartment, still smelling like chocolate cake. At first, I felt completely numb. Then the anger kicked in. My phone started ringing before I even made it back. First Mom, then Charles. I didn't pick up. Let them both go to voicemail. Their messages? More of the same. Guilt trips, accusations, emotional blackmail. The next week was hell. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. My mom sent these endless texts. Long, rambling messages that read like emotional essays. Pages of her telling me I was tearing the family apart, that I owed this to Charles, that I was being cold and selfish. She brought up every sacrifice she'd ever made for us growing up. Charles's messages were shorter, but they hit hard. Stuff like, "You're going to make me lose this baby," and "I hope you're happy," or "My baby deserves a safe home and you're denying that." She even sent me an ultrasound photo with a message that said, "This is who you're hurting." And then the extended family joined in. Apparently, Mom had made a few phone calls of her own. Pretty soon, my aunts, Mom's sisters, started calling, and I knew exactly what was coming. A few cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly popped up in my social media messages. Every one of them came at me with the same script. Clearly something my mom had fed them. According to her, I was this heartless, selfish guy who was swimming in money because I owned an apartment, and I was cruelly refusing to help my poor, pregnant sister. One of my aunts went so far as to tell me I needed to do the right thing and honor my mother, like I was some kind of disappointment to the family name. Another accused me of turning my back on my responsibilities as a son and a brother. Not one of them mentioned the fact that Charles was already living rent-free in a house I legally co-owned, or that the help I was being asked to give was literally handing over my brand new home. I tried to explain the truth to the first aunt who called me, laid out the facts calmly, but she cut me off, repeating the same line over and over. Family comes first. After that, I gave up trying to reason with anyone. I sent one group text to my mom and Charles to make things clear. I wrote, "My decision about my apartment is final. It belongs to me and I'm not giving it up. What happened at the so-called family meeting, especially you, Mom, throwing cake at me, and this constant harassment since then, it's all completely out of line. Do not contact me again about the apartment." If anything, that just poured gasoline on the fire. The messages kept flooding in. Accusations, guilt trips, emotional pleas. So I started blocking numbers. First my mom, then Charles, then the aunts. One by one, I shut down the noise. I was exhausted, couldn't sleep well. It was like my mind was stuck on a loop of the insanity that had exploded out of nowhere. But it became painfully obvious they truly believed they had a right to my apartment. In their eyes, I was the villain for saying no. They didn't care about the effort it took for me to buy it. They had zero interest in my side, my work, or my boundaries. The fact that they already had a perfectly good house to live in, a house I co-owned, didn't even seem to register. It's been about 4 weeks since the cake-throwing summit. Since then, it's been non-stop drama. The only slight change came after I started blocking people, but even that didn't stop the guilt trips completely. There's been no resolution, no apology, just more entitlement. If anything, their belief that I'd wronged them has only gotten louder. I haven't spoken to my mom or Charles directly since I walked out of that house. Aside from the one text I sent them, I've said nothing. Every attempt they've made to contact me since has just been more abuse, more demands, or more relatives trying to act like their personal messengers. It took a few weeks of that constant noise for me to finally stop reacting and start thinking clearly. That's when it hit me. This wasn't some one-time emotional outburst. This was how they actually saw me, not as a person, not as family, but as a resource. Something to be used. That realization flipped a switch in me. Here they were, living rent-free in a house I owned half of, hitting me up for money constantly, and now demanding I give up the only thing I'd ever truly earned for myself. The entitlement was unreal. That's when I knew there was no coming back from this. So I made a decision. One that felt huge, but also necessary. Last week, I hired a lawyer. Someone who knows property law inside and out. I laid everything out for him, every detail. Showed him Grandma's will, the deed to the house, the messages. He looked it all over and confirmed what I already knew. Charles and I legally own the house 50-50. There's nothing in the will about lifetime residency for Mom or Charles. No strings attached. Just a clean, equal split between me and my sister. The lawyer explained something called a partition sale. Basically, if co-owners can't agree on what to do with a property, one of them can take it to court and ask a judge to force a sale. The house gets sold and the proceeds are split between the owners. It's apparently a pretty common way to settle disputes like this. And that's exactly the route I'm taking. I've officially told my lawyer to begin the process to force the sale of the house. If Charles and Mom still want to live there, Charles is going to have to buy me out, pay me for my 50% share based on the fair market value. After looking at comparable homes in the area, we estimate it's worth somewhere between $350,000 and $400,000. That means my cut would be around $175,000 to $200,000. Given their situation, especially with Donald still not holding down a steady job, I seriously doubt they can come up with that kind of money. So yeah, odds are the house will be sold to someone else and Charles and I will each walk away with our share. That also means they'll have to move out and figure out a new living situation. And honestly, it means the little bit of a relationship I thought I still had with them is probably gone for good. But I'm done. I'm done being the family ATM. I'm done being guilt-tripped, manipulated, and treated like a backup plan. I'm also making the no-contact thing official and permanent. That includes the relatives who joined the mob to harass me. They're out of my life now too. I'm writing all of this here on Reddit because I just needed to get it out. And yeah, part of me wants to know, am I going too far? Is this the nuclear option? The will is simple and direct. The house was left to me and Charles, named clearly as equal owners, tenants in common. That's it. No lifetime rights, no conditions, no ambiguity. There was nothing in Grandma's will about anyone having a special right to live in the house forever. I touched on this before, but just to be more specific, my lawyer had a couple of local real estate agents take a look and give some informal estimates. They figured the house, a decent 3-bedroom in a modest suburb, would likely sell for somewhere between $350,000 and $400,000 in the current market. So, my share would be around $175,000 to $200,000 before any closing costs or taxes. Some folks asked whether I'd ever put money into the place over the years. The answer is yeah, a little here and there. Over 7 years, I probably threw in a few grand, like when the water heater died one winter or when Mom said she was short on the property tax bill. I never expected to get paid back. I co-owned the place, after all, and I figured it was fair to help out in emergencies even if they were living there rent-free and I wasn't using the property at all. But no, I wasn't covering routine bills or anything like that. And there was no mortgage on the house to begin with. Donald, Charles's boyfriend? Far as I know, nothing's changed there. He's still hanging around and still no sign of a steady job. He was right there at the infamous cake meeting, chiming in about how selfish I was. He sure seems comfortable benefiting from the free housing, though. Since sending that one text after the cake incident, I haven't reached out to them at all. My lawyer advised that I keep all official communication about the house strictly between him and Charles or her lawyer if she ever gets one. And honestly, after how they acted, I had zero desire to talk to them again anyway. The thing I kept circling back to, and what so many people here pointed out too, was the sheer lack of respect. It wasn't just about the ask, the way they went about it, the outrage when I said no, and their belief that I somehow owed them the apartment that told me everything. They didn't see me as a person with my own life. They saw me as a resource, a bank account, someone they could lean on, take from, and guilt whenever it suited them. And the idea of them living in Grandma's house, rent-free, trashing me to anyone who'd listen, feeling totally justified in doing so while I just sat back and swallowed it, that was too much. It was never about revenge. It was about drawing a line. Selling the house wasn't plan A. Not even close. But I realized it was the only way to truly cut the cord. Any smaller move, asking for rent, setting boundaries, I knew they'd just bulldoze over it or use it to spin more drama. I needed a clean break. So I followed through. Here's how it all went down. I took my time looking. I didn't want just anyone, I wanted someone with real experience in family property disputes. I ended up finding a lawyer who had dealt with situations like mine more than a few times. Our first meeting lasted about an hour and a half. I laid it all out for him, from Grandma's will to the chocolate cake to the barrage of text messages. He listened calmly, asked smart questions, and explained how the partition sale process works in clear terms. The first official move was for my lawyer to draft a letter to Charles since she's the co-owner. It was sent via registered mail, and we also sent a copy to my mother just to cover all bases since she lives there too. The letter was firm but polite. It stated my intent to sell my 50% share of the house. We included the estimated value range $350K to $400,000 and formally offered Charles the chance to buy out my share at fair market value. We gave her 30 days to respond. Truthfully, we didn't expect Charles to have the money to buy me out, and she didn't surprise us. No reply came in from her or from any lawyer representing her. About 2 weeks after we sent the letter, though, my lawyer did get something, a handwritten letter from my mother. And wow, it was not friendly. It was several pages long, full of rage and accusations. She called me greedy, claimed I was heartless for trying to throw my sister and her unborn child out on the street, and said I was spitting on Grandma's legacy. She demanded that I put an end to this legal madness. Once the 30-day window closed and there was still no offer or official reply, my lawyer filed the partition lawsuit. It's a formal legal request asking a judge to order the sale of the house since the co-owners can't agree on what to do with it. Charles was officially served with the court documents. That means a professional process server actually showed up at Grandma's house and handed her the paperwork in person. From the time I made the decision to hire the lawyer to the point the lawsuit was filed, it took about 6 weeks total. And let me tell you, it felt like the longest 6 weeks of my life. The fallout? Predictable. Just louder. When Charles got those court papers in her hand, reality finally hit. This wasn't just me sending a letter or laying down a boundary. This was legal. This was happening. My mom lost it. She started calling my lawyer's office nonstop, yelling at his paralegal, demanding to speak to him directly. She accused him of tearing our family apart, of helping me betray my own blood. Luckily, the paralegal handled it like a pro. She told my mom calmly that since Charles was the co-owner, she'd need to get her own attorney to handle the matter. Charles ended up getting a lawyer through legal aid. Her attorney filed a response to the partition lawsuit, and no surprise, the first thing they did was try to stall the whole process. According to my lawyer, their response mostly focused on how Charles should be allowed to stay in the house because she was pregnant and didn't have much income. They floated ideas like me being forced to sell my share to her for well below market value or letting her pay me back over a long stretch of time. My lawyer told me straight up those arguments don't usually hold up in court. But honestly, the biggest outcome at that stage wasn't legal, it was personal. For the first time, they finally realized I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't threatening to take action, I was already taking it. The legal gears were turning, and they couldn't stop them by yelling or guilt-tripping me. I heard through the grapevine that the stress levels in that house skyrocketed. Charles was deep into her 3rd trimester by then, so yeah, the timing wasn't ideal. But they had backed themselves into this corner, not me. As rough as it's been, I've actually felt a weird sense of relief through it all. Taking formal steps, having a lawyer in my corner, and knowing it's not just me trying to defend myself, it's professionals handling it now has taken a lot of the pressure off. I kept my phone lines and social media sealed tight. My mother, Charles, and Donald are still blocked. Every piece of communication now runs strictly between lawyers. It's not fun, but it's a path forward. And I'm not backing down. It's been 10 months since I first posted asking if I was wrong for standing my ground. Feels like it happened in another lifetime. That first update was about 8 months ago when the legal stuff had just started rolling. And now, after months of drawn-out stress, the whole thing is officially over. The house is sold. It's done. To be honest, the legal side took a lot longer than I expected. Charles's legal aid lawyer dragged things out every chance they got, filing motions, asking for extensions, trying anything they could to slow the process. They painted a picture in court of a struggling young mother just trying to stay in her home with her newborn while her wealthy, heartless brother was trying to boot her into the street. My lawyer had to keep reminding the court that all I was doing was exercising a basic legal right to sell jointly owned property after being hit with an insane demand and months of abuse. There were a couple of short court hearings. My lawyer handled them without me having to show up, which I was extremely grateful for. In the end, the judge made it clear, the law is the law. We couldn't agree, so the house had to be sold and the money split evenly. To make sure everything was handled fairly, the court appointed a neutral real estate agent to list and sell the house. That part took a little time too. Unsurprisingly, my mom and sister weren't exactly cooperative. The agent told my lawyer they'd miss appointments, refuse to open the door for showings, and sometimes leave the place a complete mess when buyers came by. Eventually, my lawyer had to send a formal warning through Charles's attorney. It spelled out that if they kept interfering with the sale, we'd go back to court and ask the judge to hold them accountable for the delays and possibly make them pay extra fees. That seemed to get their attention. Things got better, if not friendly. The house finally went on the market and stayed listed for about 3 months. There was a fair amount of interest, and it eventually sold for $380,000, smack in the middle of our original estimate. After closing costs, legal fees, and the agent's commission, the final amount left to split between me and Charles was $345,000. That meant we each got $172,500. That money hit my bank account last week. Seeing the wire transfer come through brought this mix of emotions, relief more than anything. It was like this massive weight I'd been dragging around had finally dropped off my back. Charles, my mother, Donald, and the baby, who I've since found out is a boy, had to be out of the house before closing. The real estate agent did one final walkthrough and told my lawyer the place was in decent shape. No major damage, thankfully, though she said it was cluttered and they used every bit of the time they had to get moved out. I can only imagine how hectic and stressful that move was for them, but they had months of notice that this was coming. They knew the consequences. As for me, I'm still living in my apartment. Now, it feels more like a sanctuary than ever before. That $172,500 is sitting in a high-interest savings account while I figure out what to do next. I've thought about investing or maybe using it as a down payment on a small rental property in the future. No rush, though. Just knowing that money is there and that I've completely cut the financial tie to my family is a relief I didn't know I needed. I sleep better. My mind's quieter. Work has even gotten a little easier. I picked up a small promotion a few months back, which was a much-needed bright spot. As for my mom's current situation, I haven't heard anything directly and I have no intention of reaching out. But I've caught bits and pieces through a distant cousin who still posts vague updates online. Sounds like my mom moved in with her sister, my Aunt Nancy, for now. But Nancy's house is small, and from what I gather, things are already getting tense. Apparently, my mom's still bitter. She's been telling anyone who'll listen that I'm a heartless monster who made my family homeless just to pad my bank account. I don't care anymore. Let her spin whatever story makes her feel better. I know the truth. I stood up for myself, I protected what I built, and I finally put an end to years of guilt and manipulation. As for Charles and Donald, well, they did end up renting a small apartment somewhere. From what I heard, it's in a town about an hour outside the city where rent's more affordable. I don't know the exact address or any real details beyond that. They walked away with $172,500 from the house sale, same as me. For them, that's a significant chunk of money. If they're smart about it, they could use it as a down payment on a modest home or at the very least build a decent safety net for the baby. But if I'm being real, I have my doubts. Donald's never exactly been a model of financial stability. The whole time I knew him, he was always between jobs or waiting for the right opportunity. And given how often both of them came to me for help over the years, it's hard to believe they've suddenly changed their habits. I wouldn't be shocked if that money starts to disappear faster than it should. Charles has had the baby now. I know that much. It's a boy. I guess that makes me an uncle, technically. But I've never seen him. Not once. That's a weird thing to say out loud, that you're an uncle to a kid you've never met. But that's where we are. As for the extended family, most of the people who jumped down my throat last year, calling me selfish, cruel, heartless, have gone completely silent. No messages. No apologies. Nothing. A couple of my younger cousins, ones I was actually pretty close to when we were growing up, did reach out a few months back. They'd apparently heard more of the full story, maybe even stumbled on my original Reddit post or someone sent it their way. Either way, they came at me with a very different tone. They were more thoughtful, more understanding. I think they realized things weren't as black and white as my mother made them seem. I was polite when they messaged me. I responded, but I kept it short. I didn't try to restart any deep conversations or rebuild lost bridges. The truth is, the trust just isn't there anymore. I've stayed firm on the no-contact boundary. I haven't spoken a single word to my mother or sister since before the court process really kicked off. No calls. No texts. No random messages on social media. It's been complete silence. And you know what? The silence feels good. Peaceful, even. It's a kind of quiet I didn't realize I needed. The sale of Grandma's house brought this whole mess to a close. That was the final chapter. The whole ordeal, start to finish, was emotionally draining and honestly kind of heartbreaking. It made me see my family in a light I'd never expected. And not a good one. In the end, I had to come to terms with something I never thought I'd say. I don't really have a family anymore, not in the traditional sense. That relationship, whatever it used to be, isn't there now. Not with my mom, not with Charles. That chapter of my life is over. And as sad as that sounds, there's a strange kind of freedom in it too.